Yesterday, we heard about one of um, Ravana's sons and four other generals, five other generals, five total, getting defeated. And his son was particularly like tough customer. But now we're going to hear Ram and Lakshman laid low. You know who that did that one? Indrajit, right? Ravana was becoming increasingly anxious. His fear. Now, this is Krishna Dharma writing. There's some British English in here that I have to look. We have to look the words up because I don't know what they mean. But he says some things that I don't think Valmiki says. And Ravana feeling fear. I don't know if he felt fear. He felt angry. But he's saying, me feel fear overpowered. His fear overpowered the grief and losing his sons and brothers. Well, at least brother, because Kumbhakarna was finished. He sat, lost in thought, on his golden throne. One after another, his most powerful fighters were being slain. Even when the two human princes had been overcome and thrown down by Indrajit's irresistible weapons, still they somehow recovered. When Ram had killed even the formidable Kumbhakarna, who was there left who could face the prince and live? Surely he was Vishnu himself, the Rakshasa's supreme enemy. Now, I don't think that's in Valmiki Ramayana either, but that's okay. He says this several times. Ram suspects he's Vishnu. Doesn't we checked? And it's not in the earlier message mentions are not there. Ravana's eyes narrowed. He now faced a great peril. He ordered his ministers to check every defensive post around the city. Extra guards should be posted day and night. There should be extreme vigilance. Anyone found neglectful of his duty would be immediately executed. The demon hissed with anger. The thought of surrender did not cross his mind for a moment. Victory or death were the only choices. Brooding on Atikaya's fall, that was his son that was particularly difficult to deal with, he went into his chambers and sat disconsolately on a golden couch. Indrajit then approached him and said, "Oh, Lord of the Rakshasas, why are you held in the grip of sorrow? Do you not see me by your side? How will those two humans survive when I go out again for battle? They were lucky to escape last time, but their luck has now run out. Behold them today, lying prostrate on the ground, torn to pieces by my weapons." Indrajit consoled his father by vowing that he would kill Ram and Lakshman. Ravana was heartened. He gave his assent to his son, and without delay Indrajit prepared for battle. And there's this ritual they go through, preparing for battle. The prince donned his impenetrable armor and mounted his great chariot drawn by tigers. Blowing his massive conch, he proceeded along Lanka's main highway. At once many other fierce Rakshasas began to follow. Some rode horses, some boars, and some giant donkeys. Others mounted lions, jackals, and even huge scorpions. That must have been a scene. Can you imagine mounting a scorpion? Make a great movie. Other Rakshasas who had hideous, twisted faces mounted crows, vultures, and peacocks. Soon an enormous number of Rakshasas were assembled for battle, headed by Indrajit. Those demon warriors, equipped with every kind of weapon, marched to the sound of kettle drums and conches, making the earth vibrate. Indrajit sat aboard his chariot, which was covered over with a white parasol. He was being fanned by beautiful golden handled whisks and worshipped by Yatudanas. Yatudanas, chanting sacred hymns. There's something like bards, a certain group of or classification of people like that. As he proceeded for battle, he shone like Indra amid the gods. Ravana stood upon a high rampart watching his son. He felt confident. No one in all the worlds could stand against Indrajit, be they gods, Danavas, or Daityas. What then of humans and monkeys, after all? Indrajit had already overpowered the two humans. Surely this time there would be no lucky escapes. Ravana shouted a blessing to Indrajit as he reached the northern gate. The demon prince turned to his father with palms joined, then raised his hand, and the army rushed out with a mighty roar. Very dramatic. As the Rakshasas reached the battlefield, Indrajit halted them and had them surround him. He dismounted from his chariot and lit a fire. While reciting Vedic mantras, the demon worshipped the sacred fire. He poured oblations of ghee into the fire and made offerings of lances, spears, and swords in place of the traditional reeds and grasses. Clasping the neck of a dark-hued goat, the demon slit its throat and placed it on the fire. Yuck. As the fire burst into flames, the fire god appeared in person. Shining like refined gold, he personally accepted the offerings. Indrajit then climbed back aboard his chariot. He sat in meditation and invoked the Brahmastra. While the Rakshasa was charging all his weapons and his chariot with the force that that celestial missile, the heavens seemed to quake in fear. Having finished his incantations, Indrajit blazed like a smokeless fire. By his own mystic power, he became invisible, along with his weapons, chariot and all. He gave the order to charge, and the army of Rakshasas went forward, roaring in various dissonant tones. They struck the monkeys from a distance with their ornamented arrows and lances, thrown with tremendous velocity. The Rakshasas then fell upon the monkeys in a fury. Remaining invisible, Indrajit assailed the monkey army with razor-headed arrows, lances, and maces. The monkeys realized the demon was fighting invisibly and surrounded the place from where his weapons flew. They hurled numerous trees and boulders at him, but the demon cut them to pieces. He tore apart the bodies of the monkeys with his irresistible arrows. With a single arrow, the Rakshasa pierced as many as 5, 7, and even a dozen monkeys. Pretty capable fighter, Indrajit. Even though they were being exterminated by Indrajit, the monkeys, who had dedicated their lives to Ram's cause, stood their ground. They repeatedly surrounded the deadly demon, sending an endless shower of rocks and trees in his direction. Indrajit moved off invisibly and searched for the chief monkey warriors. One after another, he pierced Nila, Jambavan, Sugriva, Angada, Rishabha, Dvidvida, and many other monkey heroes. He rendered all of them virtually unconscious with his terrible shafts. With great joy, the Rakshasa beheld the Vanara army being overwhelmed on all sides by his cruel weapons. He rose into the sky above the monkeys and continued to rain down countless arrows like a dark cloud in the monsoon season. With their bodies ripped apart, the monkeys fell shrieking like mountains thrown down by Indra's thunderbolt. They could not see the demon in his chariot, but saw only an endless stream of sharp pointed shafts falling from the heavens. Indra sent forth a shower of violent weapons, which gave off sparks and incandescent flames. He covered the monkeys with axes, swords, lances, and pikes, all of those weapons charged with mystic power. Indrajit then sought out Ram and Lakshman, covering them with torrents of arrows. Not minding the arrows any more than a mountain would mind a shower of rain, Ram said to his brother, "This demon Indrajit has engaged the invincible weapon of Brahma. Behold, our entire army has been virtually overpowered. We too will have to succumb to Brahma's weapon, I fear." Ram knew that in the all of this narration, there's it oscillates between the divine Ram and the human Ram, and sometimes it's both. We've been hearing it over and over. So this is the human Ram that's going to be overwhelmed by Brahma's astra. Ram knew that no being in the universe could resist the Brahmastra except by invoking the same weapon to counter it. But the meeting of the two Brahmastras was highly dangerous. It could bring about the destruction of the whole cosmos and would likely cause the death of millions of innocent creatures. Ram did not want that to happen. He and Lakshman sent hundreds and thousands of powerful shafts toward the Rakshasa, but Indrajit shrugged off the arrows and continued aiming his weapons at the two brothers. The demon again and again recited the incantations sacred to Brahma and sent fierce arrows at Ram and Lakshman. The princes were completely covered by Indrajit's arrows. They bled all over and appeared like a couple of kinshuka trees covered in red blossoms. Grievously wounded by Indrajit's assault, they both fell to the ground and dropped their bows. Not good. Indrajit sent up a cry of victory. He considered Ram and Lakshman dead. The demon looked around the battlefield and saw that only a few thousand monkeys remained standing. The battle was surely won. Seeing the sun approaching the western horizon, Indrajit decided to return to Lanka and tell his father the good news. If any of the monkey army remained on the battlefield, he could finish them tomorrow. Appearing in the sky like a blazing planet, Indrajit commanded the Rakshasa troops to withdraw, and they quickly entered Lanka, roaring in joy. On the battlefield, Hanuman still remained standing. He looked around at the scene of devastation wrought by Indrajit. Even Ram and Lakshman, along with Sugriva, Angada, Nila, and all the other powerful Vanara commanders, lay prostrate. The monkey ran up to the two princes and knelt by their side. He was joined by Vibhishan, who had also survived Indrajit's attack. Tears fell from Hanuman's eyes as he gazed at the unconscious brothers. They appeared to be severely wounded. Placing his hand on Hanuman's shoulder, Vibhishan reassured him gently. Do not give way to despondency, my valiant friend. These two brothers are not killed. Surely they have allowed themselves to be brought under the power of Brahma's weapon in honor of the self-born creator of the universe. Ram and Lakshman are always protected by virtue. Indeed, they are virtue personified. We will yet see them rise to defeat Ravana and his evil forces. Hanuman embraced the Rakshasa and thanked him for his kind words. But what could he do now? How could the battle continue with only a handful of monkeys and bears still standing? Even Ram and Lakshman seemed in no condition to fight. As Hanuman and Vibhishan looked around, they saw Jambavan lying nearby. The wise old leader of the bears was covered with arrows, but his head was moving slightly. Vibhishan ran over to him and knelt down, calling his name. Jambavan opened his eyes and looked at the Rakshasa. He spoke barely in a whisper. "Oh, Vibhishan, I can hardly see you, wounded as I am by Indrajit's arrows. Our army is now in grave danger. But if Hanuman still survives, then there is hope. Tell me, does the son of the wind god live?" Vibhishan was surprised that Jambavan had first inquired after Hanuman rather than Ram and Lakshman. He called Hanuman over, and the monkey came quickly and knelt before Jambavan. Mustering his strength, the old bear began to speak. "My dear Hanuman, it is you alone who can save the army. Only you possess the power to fly from here to the Himalayas. You must go there at once and fetch the celestial healing herbs." Jambavan explained that there was a mountain standing near Mount Kailash in which grew 4 precious herbs placed there by the gods themselves. Jambavan described the 4 plants. First, there is the Sanjiva Karani, capable of bringing a dead person back to life. Then you must find Vishalya Karani, which can completely heal all weapon wounds. The other 2 herbs are Sandhani and Suvarna Karani, which together can restore a broken body back to its pristine state. They all grow together atop this mountain. "Oh, Hanuman, leave at once and bring them here." Hanuman immediately stood up. He bounded across the Trikuta mountain and quickly climbed to its summit. From there, he leaped over to Malya mountain on Lanka's coast. Standing there, the monkey expanded his body until he appeared like a second mountain on top of the Malaya. He thought of Ram and Lakshman and of Sugriva and all the other monkeys and bears lying mortally wounded. There was no time to lose. He crouched down and with a great shout, "Victory to Ram!" he leaped toward the north. As he jumped, he pushed down the mountain and made the whole island of Lanka shake. The city seemed to be dancing at night in its lights, as its lights shook with the force of Hanuman's leap. The Rakshasas were seized with fear, thinking that Lanka was about to be consumed by an earthquake. Hanuman soared through the heavens. Being followed by the wind, he felt no resistance and sped faster and faster toward the Himalayas. In a short time, he saw the great range appearing ahead of him. From a distance, the mountains appeared like masses of white clouds. As Hanuman came closer, he saw the golden Rishabha mountain with the gods' numerous residences atop it. Passing beyond Rishabha, he saw Mount Kailash in the distance. Between Rishabha and Kailash, Hanuman saw the mountain where the celestial herbs grew. It shone brightly, and the herbs growing upon its sides appeared like flashing lights. Hanuman came down upon the mountain and began to search for the four herbs Jambavan had described. As he moved among the lush foliage, however, the herbs, perceiving that someone had come to take them, hid themselves from view. Oh no. Only the gods were able to use those divine medicines. No one else could find them. Hanuman ran about looking for the herbs. Where are they? What if he could not find them? What would happen to Ram and Lakshman? Could it be possible the two brothers would die? No, he could not let that happen. He had to fetch the herbs, even if it meant bringing the entire mountain. Hint. The monkey realized that the herbs had concealed themselves from his view. He became furious and roared loudly, thundering at the mountain, "O Lord of the mountains, as you have not shown any compassion, even to Ram and Lakshman, you shall pay the price today. Watch now as I tear up your shining peak. I shall not return without the herbs." Hanuman plunged his hands into the side of the mountain and broke off the entire section containing all the herbs. Lifting the huge mountain summit above his head, the monkey sprang into the air. Hanuman soared high in the sky, bearing aloft the mountain with its trees, elephants, tigers, deer, and herbs. He blazed with his own splendor, and with the effulgent mountain held in his hands, he looked like the sun coursing through the sky. Once again, his father Vayu raced behind him, and he soon arrived near Lanka. Having accomplished such an inconceivable feat in Ram's service, Hanuman descended near the Trikuta and set down the celestial hill of herbs. Vibhishan rushed over and embraced the monkey. The Rakshasa then set about finding the medicinal herbs, perceiving them by virtue of his occult vision. Taking a handful of the herbs from Vibhishan, Hanuman went quickly to Ram and Lakshman. Both he and Vibhishan looked anxiously at the two princes, who appeared like the sun and the moon fallen to earth. They were hardly breathing. Hanuman dropped to his knees by their side. What was he in time to save them? Would the herbs work? His hand shook as he placed a bunch of herbs under Ram's nostrils. For some time, Ram showed no signs of movement. Hanuman was beside himself with anxiety. Then slowly, the prince began to stir. He breathed deeply, inhaling the celestial fragrance. Gradually, his eyes opened. He looked up at Hanuman and smiled. Haribo. No, he didn't say Haribo. The monkey breathed a deep sigh of relief. Quickly, he began administering the herbs to Lakshman. Slowly, he too returned to consciousness. Sugriva then had Sushena, a monkey expert in healing, come and tend to the princes. Using the other herbs brought by Hanuman, Sushena healed their arrow wounds. In short time, the arrows fell from their bodies, and their wounds closed up and healed. Both brothers sprang to their feet, their bodies renewed and invigorated. With tears in his eyes, Ram embraced Hanuman and thanked him for his service. The surviving monkeys moved swiftly among the wounded troops, administering the herbs to them. They crushed the herbs and allowed the wind to carry the pungent fragrance. No demons lay on the battlefield, as Ravana had ordered that they be tossed into the sea when they were slain. The demon did not want the monkeys to gain strength from seeing how many Rakshasas were killed. I don't know if that's in Valmiki Ramayana, but it's interesting. By the potency of the healing herb, hundreds of thousands of the Vanara warriors are restored to consciousness, and they jumped up shouting with joy. Even some monkeys who had been killed, but whose bodies were not destroyed, were brought back to life by the herb's potency. They felt as if they had awakened from a restful night of sleep. Soon the monkey army stood again, in their millions, ready and eager for the fight. The night was drawing to a close, and Sugriva, after consulting with Ram and Lakshman, decided to attack Lanka before the Rakshasas were aware of the situation. The monkeys took up flaming torches and moved like a surging ocean toward the city walls. Shocked and amazed to find so many monkeys clambering over the ramparts, the Rakshasa guards fled in fear. The monkeys set fire to the gates, houses, and mansions in Lanka. Ram and Lakshman sent innumerable flaming arrows into the city, and a great fire raged. Panic stricken demons ran in all directions with their clothes and hair ablaze. Great mansions and palaces were completely consumed by flames. Golden archways and walls melted and crumbled to the ground. In less than an hour, the city gave the appearance of the earth being consumed by the dread fire of annihilation. Searing red flames rose up into the sky and were reflected upon the ocean, making it appear like a charming sea of red waters. As the monkeys ran about, setting fire to anything and everything, the Rakshasas' screams were heard everywhere. They dashed out of their houses and were immediately assailed by the monkeys. Ravana was aroused from his intoxicated slumber by the clamor. He sat up in shock. What was happening? Surely this could not be the monkeys. There were only a few of them left. How could they attack Lanka while their leaders were both prostrate on the battlefield? Pulling his silk garment around his waist, the demon ran out of his chamber and called for his ministers. Seized with fury, they ran to Ravana. Seized with fear, they ran to Ravana and told him that Ram and Lakshman had somehow risen up and attacked the city. The demon king was amazed. He immediately issued orders for the Rakshasa chiefs to march out. Tens of thousands of demons, clad in golden armor, came onto the city streets. They were led by Kumbha and Nikumbha, Kumbhakarna's two powerful sons. The Rakshasas rushed toward the monkeys, attacking them with swords, pikes, maces, javelins, and countless arrows that screamed through the air. Numerous garlands, broken wine casks, and burning incenses made the city fragrant at the bellicose as the bellicose opponents tore at each other in a frenzy. Monkeys picked up Rakshasas and whirled them about, striking down other Rakshasas, while the Rakshasas lanced 5 or 7 monkeys at once with their terrible spears. Infuriated monkeys bit off the ears and crushed the skulls of the demons, pummeling them to a pulp with their fists and feet. Powerful Rakshasas tore off the heads of the Vanras and lopped off their limbs with great scimitars. Everywhere there were shouts of, "Stay! Give battle! And you are killed!" Gradually the battle spilled out of the city. Great duels were fought between the principal fighters on both sides. The Rakshasa Kampana challenged Angada and was slain by him with a blow from a mountain peak. Along with 2 powerful Vanras, Minda and Dvidvita, Angada also made short work of Sonitaksha, Upaksha, and Prajanga, 3 of the mightiest Rakshasas. Seeing his comrades killed, Kumbha roared with fury. Kumbhakarna's son, that's Kumbha, appeared awful and unassailable. He took up his tremendous bow, in no way inferior to Indra's, and loosed venomous shafts by the 1,000. Monkeys fell on all sides, screaming in pain. Minda and Dvidvita rushed toward the Rakshasa and challenged him to fight. Those monkey brothers looked like a couple of moving mountains approaching a third. As they neared Kumbha, the demon fitted a fierce arrow onto his bow and shot it at Dvidvida's chest. Hit by the arrow, Dvidvida fell to the ground and lay there, wiggling, wriggling, wriggling, and gasping for breath. Minda at once took up an enormous crag and hurled it with force at the Rakshasa. Kumbha shot 5 arrows that shattered the rock, and it fell to pieces at his feet. Taking another long shaft, he struck Minda on the breast, and the monkey fell unconscious. Angada saw his 2 uncles laid low by Kumbha, and he dashed across to challenge the Rakshasa. Kumbha laughed, making an ass-like sound which reverberated all over the battlefield. His eyes blazed like 2 red fires, and he stood in his chariot looking at like death personified. As Angada ran toward it, Kumbha shot dozens of deadly arrows which penetrated the monkey's body. Not shaken, Angada sent a shower of rocks and trees at the demon. Kumbha easily smashed the missiles with his arrows, laughing all the while. Kumbha then fired arrows which hit Angada on the forehead and made a stream of blood flow down the monkey's face. Pressing his wounds with one hand, Angada seized hold of a massive tree with the other. He whirled around and tossed that tree at the Rakshasa. It flew with the speed of the wind. Kumbha dropped to one knee and instantly shot 7 steel arrows, which sliced the flying tree to pieces. Without pausing for a moment, Kumbha released 7 more shafts, which struck Angada on the chest and sent him reeling. Not good. Ram saw that Anga was sinking to the ground under the force of Kumbha's arrows. He immediately ordered Jambavan and a number of powerful monkeys to go to Angada's assistance. They bounded toward Kumbha, throwing trees and boulders at the bellowing demon. Kumbha then spun around and shot his fierce arrows, hitting all the monkey warriors as they approached him. No one could get near the Rakshas as he stood with his uplifted bow any more than one could approach the orb of the sun. Sugriva came forward to challenge the Rakshasa. He hurled huge rocks. They must have had a big rock supply because they keep shooting rocks. He hurled huge rocks one after another at the demon's chariot, advancing continuously toward him. Kumbha smashed all the rocks thrown at him with arrows shot in a solid line. He moved with astonishing speed, striking down the rocks and simultaneously sending arrows at Sugriva. The Monkey King was pierced all over, but he did not flinch. He suddenly sprang onto Kumbha's chariot and snatched his bow, even as the Rakshasa fired arrows at him. Sugriva broke the bow in 2 and hurled it away. The monkey then leaped to the ground and addressed the Rakshasa. "Oh, Kumbha, you are the equal of Indra, Kuvera, and even the mighty Bali. Indeed, you are no less powerful than your uncle Ravana or your cousin Indrajit. You have struck down many powerful monkeys today, O demon, and this is most wonderful. But now your exploits will end. Fight me if you dare. I shall make short work of you." Kumbha was flattered by Sugriva, and his martial enthusiasm increased like a fire fed with oil. Without a word, he leaped down from his chariot and rushed toward the monkey, who stood with his arms outstretched. The 2 heroes clasped each other and grappled together. The earth shook with their heavy steps. Sugriva leaned backwards and lifted the demon above his head. Spinning around, he tossed Kumbha into the air, into the sea. The Rakshasa sank down to the seabed, but soon swam upwards again. Suddenly emerging from the ocean, the demon flew up and struck Sugriva on the chest with his fist, with a blow that sounded like a peal of thunder and which emitted a brilliant flash. Sugriva did not budge, and at once clenched his own fist, which was as hard as adamant. He swung around and brought his fist down on Kumbha's breast. Like one planet striking another, the demon's heart was split by the blow. and he fell dead to the ground as Mars would drop from the heavens. Nikumba saw his brother slain, and his anger flared. He took up his terrific mace and gazed at Sugriva as if about to consume him with his wrath. His club was fitted with iron plates and steel spikes, inlaid with gold and bedecked with diamonds and other gems. The demon wore black iron armor studded with jewels, as well as brilliant golden armlets and earrings with a garland of celestial flowers on his breast. He looked like a cloud, flashing with numerous lightning bolts. He brandished his weapon, whirling it round above his head. His mace shot forth tongues of fire, and it seemed to cause the very atmosphere to spin around. The monkey warrior fell back in terror, unable to even look at Nikumba. Hanuman came forward and stood directly before the Rakshasa. He pulled back his arms and bared his massive chest. "Strike me at once, O demon," he challenged. Oh boy. With all his strength, Nikumba brought down the mace upon Hanuman's chest. The club splintered into 100 fragments and fell to the ground like so many blazing meteors. Hanuman stood unmoved, and he smashed Nikumba on the breast with his fist. The Rakshasa's armor was shattered, and blood shot from his breast. He reeled but quickly recovered and seized hold of Hanuman, lifting him from the ground. Seeing this, other Rakshasas roared in joy. Taking hold of Hanuman, Nikumba ran toward Lanka. The monkey struck Nikumba on the head and disengaged himself from the Rakshas's grip. He landed on the ground in front of the demon. Hanuman struck Nikumba down and then hurled himself onto the Rakshas's body, pressing down all of Nikumba's limbs. Hanuman took hold of his neck and twisted it ferociously. He tore off the Rakshas's screaming head. Wow. I warned you. This is the last paragraph, by the way. He tore off the Rakshas's screaming head and hurled it into the ocean. Observing this incredible feat, the Rakshasa army fled pell-mell, Pellmell, British term, in all directions, some rushing into the city, some jumping into the sea, and others flying into the sky. Hanuman raised a great roar of victory, and the monkeys surrounding him shouted for joy. That's it for tonight. Coming attractions. Lakshman's battle with Indrajit. Well, we'll get to Ravana later. So now, how do you process all this? These are beings that have superior powers. I mean, it's interesting that Indrajit went out into the battlefield the way he went out into the battlefield and got off the chariot and started a fire and saying mantras and empowering his weapons with mantras and putting them in the fire and stuff. I mean, these aren't normal things that warriors do. Ravana had a very great father, a Brahmana father, who trained him in the Vedas when he was young, so he knew the basics, or he knew the Vedas well. But there are portions of the Vedas, because the Vedas is described. The Vedas are like a desire tree. kalpavriksha. And the desire tree is for everybody, and not everybody is in the mode of goodness, that's for sure. So there's portions of the Vedas that deal with fulfilling the desires of those in passion. The karma kanda portion of the Vedas to get what you want. And there's also portions of the Vedas that deal with ignorance, destruction of the enemy and so many other things. Because we heard a number of times the depiction of what's inside the walls of the city of Lanka. And there's temples, there's brahmanas reciting mantras, but what are the temples for and what are the mantras for? It's the portion of the Vedas that deals with destruction of the enemy and victory to your desired, favored person who the brahmanas are offering the mantras on behalf of. So that was their fascination for those that had the Vedic approach, and otherwise, it's the same idea of Sukriti and Duskriti. The kind of when the three brothers, namely Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishan, together went to the forest to undergo. It's not just Ravana underwent austerities; they all did, and they had a different desire from Brahma, and the desire from on the behalf of Vibhishan was he would always abide by virtue no matter what. That was his thing. And Ravana, we know what Ravana's was. And then there was this thing that the gods pulled Brahma to the side and said, trick him, Kumbhakarna. If he gets empowered, everyone is finished because he's too powerful. So sleep. But, so the ignorance, passion, and goodness, three different modes represented by the three different brothers going to the same source. So like that, they're fanciful in one sense, certainly by our worldly standards, but who has the capacity to do the austerities that they did, or chant the mantras that they chanted, or do the things that they do? You're becoming invisible and flying in the sky, and we don't have those abilities. The classic way that Prabhupada would deal with this stuff is the Dr. Frog philosophy, the 3 feet well. And another, there's some devotees, two mothers who have children in the 9 to 12 age range. I just learned this new terminology. Is called a tween. In between a child and a teenager is a tween. So together, these two mothers, using their, graphic skill and research skill, devised a curriculum for tweens. Does God exist? And one of the little sections is with illustrations, the Dr. Frog. So the Dr. Frog, or the meaning, someone that has knowledge capacity, gyan capacity, empiric research capacity, can't fathom beyond what their senses can conceive of. So it's quite inconceivable by the senses and the mind, because it's not within our experience. What's beyond the 3-foot well? What's beyond our experience if you're in the well? But there are powers that are beyond our powers. And to ordinary people, it's quite fanciful. And to others, it's like, wow. And then, one of the questions that's come up is how about, mode of goodness people having powers, but what about These mode of ignorance. Well, the mode of ignorance people, they have the desire tree of the Vedas, and they have austerities which they use for malevolent purposes. By austerities, there's a power that's derived. It's not easy to do austerities. Some time ago, I was reading some article about Osama bin Laden, the kind of austerities that he did. He was an extremely austere person. And with that austerity came power. And with that power came also intelligence, how to do terrible things. And he was really like the first world, anyway, without going into it. Person that have power can use it properly or misuse it. But there are people that also have powers that are beyond our conception of what a normal person can do. So that's what we're hearing. The Rakshasas, there was some discussion the other day about the difference between the Danavas, Daityas, and Rakshasas. So Rakshasas, Danavas similarly have mystical powers, but Rakshasas, they have even more mystical powers, it appears, because they can. I mean, just like when Vibhishan had also mystic powers, when he wanted to leave Lanka, he and his 4 ministers, they just rose in the air and went to Lanka. I mean, it was such a big deal that Hanuman leaped across the ocean. They just, rose in the air and went to Lanka, went to to Ram's camp. They're powerful. So we can't do those things. But some entities, by endowments of power, can do things that we can't do. And specifically, sorcery and all that stuff. Prabhupada, on more than one occasion, not too many, but more than one occasion, he spoke about witches that ride on broomsticks that still exist in the northern parts of India. He mentions the place, and they have these abilities. So, people that read about those things, the Harry Potter fans and stuff like that, where did they get that idea? And is it just fiction, or is it something that's real? And some people have those powers. And it's according to Prabhupada's description, it's simply a manipulation of material laws. By machine or by mantra, by yantra or by mantra. One can fly or one can fly. And mystic powers are nothing but manipulation of subtle material laws. So behind the grosser material laws, there's subtle material laws. And, when scientists do it, it's like, wow. Right? I remember one time somebody telling me what a fax machine is, and I thought they were just teasing me. Then I found out it wasn't just. So they just the subtle material laws. And then you can do it without, a cable. You just do it by however they do it. By vibration, and it goes and it comes back. So that's like what text messages is. And it, and it keeps going and keeps going. Like we're hearing about Mars, and, America goes to the Mars, and China goes to Mars, and who knows what's next. It's just manipulation of laws of nature. And by the whatever austerities the scientists have undergone to send something to Mars, it's austerity being directed towards something, conquest of space and showing their might or something like that. It doesn't get to the subtleness of ancient Vedic times, But the principle is not so different. Manipulation of laws, subtle material laws. So, and then there's these two premises, the divine and demoniac nature. Here we go, divine and demoniac nature. Some that have this power, some that have that power. But the have I remember as a small boy growing up, why is it always that the good guys win? Because mode of goodness is stronger, light is stronger than darkness. Mode of goodness is stronger. Behind that mode of goodness, for those who are like the, Vibhishan saying to Hanuman, he's virtue personified. Surely he'll be protected. So one who has faith in virtue means you have faith in Vishnu. Let's say it the other way. One who doesn't have faith in virtue doesn't have faith in Vishnu. Because if you're not going to be protected by being a virtuous, like, people that are good, they'll be exploited because they're looked upon as being weak. But the personality of God is always behind those that are virtuous. And that's where the victory comes. Why virtue prevails over vice. Because Lord Vishnu is there. And it may sometimes look like it's going the other way. And so we have these episodes where it looks like it's going the other way. And then comes along a virtuous person that says, no, no, no. No, in the age of Kali, it is a fact that quality and the qualities of virtue and qualities of everything that's exalted diminish. It's just a symptom of the age of Kali, and there's no stopping that. One can reduce its rate, and one can take shelter and have virtue prevail over its opposite in an individual and even in groups of individuals, and stave off the unrestricted degradation of the lower qualities and lower modes of nature. But it's still going to happen because it's the Lord's plan. The Lord's plan means he sanctions when people misuse free will. They're ultimately checked, but the progress of degradation goes on. And it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. Where is it going next? It's kind of scary where it's going next, and where's it going after that? And so the idea, major part of the idea is take shelter of virtue. And because thereby you'll receive Vishnu's protection. And even the Vanaras were killed or put unconscious and things like that. There was a plan of the Supreme Lord to relieve them. If you're going to be a warrior on the battlefield, you better be ready for battle. And it's not always victory on a battlefield. But in life, stand by virtue. Whatever is going on. Stand by virtue, stand by the truth. That's the lesson over and over again from Krishna's Leela as well. So let's see if there's some discussion. This reading was a little shorter because some of the reading as the battle gets like really long, and it's hard to keep reading it. To be honest, it's hard to keep reading Hanuman ripping off the head of Nikumba, throwing it into the sea. Okay. Any discussion? Can I have I have a suggestion? Sometime, not now, but sometime in between now and the next class, just unentangle the spaghetti, so we have one cable rather than what we got now. Thanks. We have one topic over here. Hand up.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the class. And I guess my question was like regarding Vivida, like he was a warrior in Rama's army, and he was like serving Lord Ram. But then by the time like Krishna and Balaram come, he's like kind of basic.
Bad association. It's like Krishna's son became corrupt by bad association. Right?
I'm not familiar with the story much.
Remember his name. When Varaha picked up Mother Earth, there was a child that was born from that contact. And I'm forgetting the child's name. Someone can remember, can say the name. Huh? Bomasura. By association, he became an Asura, Krishna's own son. So by association, something good can become bad. So keep good association. Stay away from the bad association. Yeah.
Krishna Maharaj, thank you for wonderful class and reading. Maharaj, one question I had which was troubling me for almost a month now.
Really?
Is this Canto 3 from Bhagavatam. It says that, I will read that. I mean, it says the earth was placed on the water when the fight happened. But we all know that earth rotates around the axis in a space. So how the earth from the water moved to the space?
Okay, I'm not clear. What Hiranyaksha did was resulted in the earth falling to the bottom of the Garbhodak Ocean. Lord Varaha plunged into the Garbhodak Ocean and lifted the earth on his tusks. So your question is, when he lifted the earth from the Garbhodak Ocean, how to go back into its proper place in space?
Yeah,
That's your question?
Canto, yeah, correct. In 47th verse, it says that he placed it on water. He lifted the earth from the water and then he placed it on water.
No, those are two different questions. One question is, where is the Garbhodak water? The other question is, how to go back from the water to space? Those are two different questions. Your question is, how does it go back into space?
Because I think it's right now in a space, it's not on the water. So I'm saying the Bhagavatam says it is placed on the water. There is no chapter or verse which says from the water it
doesn't need to say it. How many verses do you want in Srimad Bhagavatam to say everything? If it doesn't say something specifically, one answer is there's only 18,000 verses. It can't say everything. He rescued it And it doesn't say how he put it back. That's one answer. So here's a related is what keeps the planets, what brings the planets and keeps the planets in their particular orbit? That's another question. You know, in the scientists say gravity. That's what keeps the planets in their orbit. So what did gravity like pull the that we because we don't hold to the gravity idea. What idea do we hold to? There's two ideas that we hold to. One is the planets are on the hoods of Anantashesh. So that is a possible one of the missing pieces that's not there in the verses of the Bhagavatam is Ananta lifted. That's a possibility. That which lifts and holds the planets in their places, the power of Anantashesh. And it doesn't even have to be literally he places it on his hoods. It can be by his spiritual power. He lifts the planets. So that's a possibility. There's a second possibility. That's described in the 5th canto. And I forget the Sanskrit term, but it's something like pravaha, something, something. There's ropes of air. You ever seen a rope of air? Of course not. But according to the Bhagavatam, there's ropes of air that, it's a subtle air, by the way, that connect each planet with Dhruvaloka. And as Dhruvaloka turns, the ropes of air cause the planets to move in their celestial orbits, assisted by a wind, Dakshinavara something. I'm sorry, I don't have all the terminology down, but it's beyond our experience for sure. It's probably beyond our comprehension to like really understand it, although some people can explain it. I don't know how much they understand it. But those are two possibilities. You know, how did that rope of air get again fastened to the earth that pulled it back? No explanation. Or once it's back, it stays in that position by that method. So that it's not explained in the Bhagavatam is not a surprise, because not everything is explained. There are many things that aren't. There are many things that are. And and essences are there, but not all of the final next step details of everything. It's not there. Let's take, for example, from the 3rd canto, the unfolding of the elements. Brahma's creation. Or later on, Kapila Dev's description of Sankhya philosophy. There's principles, and they're hard to understand, what to speak of the details. Like, can you do that again in slow motion? Could I see a picture of the thing happening? That detail isn't there. It's principle-based. So it's not for me, it's not a problem that it's not explained how it got from the surface of the Garbhodak Ocean back into its place of orbit. There can be different explanations. And if our acharyas say it happened this way, there you go. But where they get that understanding if it's not in the Bhagavatam or some direct explanation within the Vedas? In Samadhi, they can understand these things, and we don't have that capacity. So we just accept what they say. There's realizations from the personality. That's what the Bhagavatam is. It's Vyasadeva Samadhi. And things are imparted to him in his Samadhi. And he writes them for us. So if some detail is not there, no problem. It could be this, it could be that. We don't do what the scientists do, perhaps maybe. But there are some principles that we do know exist. And it could be this principle, that principle.
Thank you, Maharaj. I have another question.
Okay.
how do how does one prepare himself for a death?
Future what?
How does one prepare himself for a death?
For death. For death. Uh, uh, um, Recently, Pankajangri Prabhu left. And I didn't read the entire article, but Madhavananda Prabhu from Puri, Gaur Govinda Maharaj's disciple that, is a good speaker and writer, he wrote a very nice offering saying for Pankajangri, he doesn't feel any sadness. For Pankajangri, he feels no sadness because his life, so this is in it, the response, his life was very singularly focused. And because his life was singularly focused, that means his heart and his mind were singularly focused. And that's where he's gone. He wrote, my sadness is for those who miss him. Because his association was so wonderful and so meaningful, etc. But how you prepare yourself for that, it's not just knowledge and detachment from the temporary, but it's not ashram specific either. It's a consciousness directed, focused upon the personality you've guided with whatever capacity you have, and then some, in service, according to your nature and abilities and propensities and everything. Attachment to Krishna is the way to prepare yourself from detachment from matter, because it's inevitable. We don't know when. One of the benefits for devotees that this pandemic is having is it's helping them to understand how important the time that we now have is, and the valuable association that is available to us now is, because these great souls, they're no longer with us. And how much did we avail ourselves to those great souls when they were with us? Besides that, now we miss them. So there are great souls in our midst that in some number of days they're not going to be with us. How much are we availing ourselves to their association? That kind of light has gone on for a number of devotees. And then they anticipate that's going to subside after some time too. This heightened sense of urgency will subside through passage of time. So that kind of a question is not a question we like to ask on a sustained basis. So it's not so much even just prepare for the moment of death. It's using our life to become attached to Krishna as our capacity permits. Something that's come up a few times lately in the course of our discussions is enthusiasm. And enthusiasm is not just prepare for death, but enthusiasm to be attached to Krishna. And that overcomes this, sinking back down again when the calamity is over. Its enthusiasm continues beyond the circumstance. I like the way Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes about it. when enthusiasm becomes cold, like as opposed to hot, when enthusiasm becomes cold, then the lower modes take over. So, how to remain enthusiastic so it doesn't get cold? And that's the topic that we've been discussing, or people have been asking.
Very
Okay, let's see if there's something online. I think you need to turn that machine so it's not pointing towards him. Just turn the whole machine. There we go.
This is from Snehawali Devidasi. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. We heard that after Sanjeevani pastime, Lord Rama decided to attack Lanka at night. So we know that according to the rules of warfare, the war happens from sunrise to sunset. So how can we understand this strategy of Lord Ram?
She asked really good questions. And my answer is, I'm going to have to ask our scholars who know Ramayana. And our scholars, with knowing Ramayana means there must be some commentary by Govindaraj and other expert commentators to explain that. I don't have an answer, but they must have explored it because they touch on all these like sensitive things. It's a sensitive thing. I thought the same thing, Snehavali, as I was reading. Why is he going at night? They're asleep. And it's like the rules. You don't just anyway, so what that you're not it's not only at night, but they were asleep. You don't attack somebody when they're asleep. That's another rule. So, how to explain that? Let's see what Govindaraj has to say. Let's see if our scholars can find, because they're busy too, and I don't know if they have the time to go search through Govindaraj's commentary before tomorrow evening's class, but I'll ask. You make a note and send it to me, okay?
Second question from Mataji is, I was surprised to hear that demigod Agni appeared and accepted Indrajit's offering when he performed a fire sacrifice before leaving for the battlefield. Demigods accepted demons' offering even during the battle. Could you please comment on this?
Yeah, two comments. I don't know if that's what's in Valmiki Ramayana is one comment. So, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That's a comment. Then another comment is demigods don't refuse offerings made by demons, whatever the circumstance. They make offerings, they accept their offerings. That's what demigods do. They say, sorry, you're a demon, I'm not taking your offering. They accept. Like Satrajit, for example. He was being worshipped, he was worshiping the sun god. Sun god certainly knew his mentality, and he reciprocated. He worshipped him so nicely, he gave him what he wanted, wealth. And with the wealth came pride, and with pride came his ruination. But, the reciprocation was there. So those are my two responses to that question. It was a surprise, certainly. It was a surprise that he stopped, got off his chariot, and did the whole yajna right on the battlefield. That was also a surprise. How devoted he was to that source of power. But, he's not an ordinary fellow. These are not ordinary fellows. These are very special people. Rakshasas, and amongst the Rakshasas, Indrajit was special. Next.
This is from Shrida Das. Um, asking, sometimes there is an argument from friends and relatives from material. They say that by just staying in Varanasi and leaving the body there, one gets liberated. My understanding is those souls go to Shivaloka, Kailash, but may I kindly know if it is considered liberation too, since Lord Shiva is also an eternal person. Similarly, his abode. Please.
I've come across, not specifically about Varanasi and leaving your body there, but the kind of liberation that is offered by Lord Shiva is not the spiritual world as you have expressed. And exactly where that destination is, I can't remember what this article said, but it's not Vaikuntha realm. It's a relief. It's a cessation of the material, the lower material regions, relief from that harassment of the lower material regions, and elevation to a higher Shiva region, Shiva Loka region. But exactly what that is, I can't say. But the direction of what you're saying is correct. And anything that's based upon you do this and you get that, it's temporal and material. Because entrance into the Vaikuntha realm, the actual transcendental realm, is a matter of consciousness, not just you do this and you get that. Like a business deal. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.